Strangers on a Train. What a really seminal movie we're going to be talking about in this installment of Movie Tales, and for a few reasons. First off, it's the 10th episode we're doing of this show, which is kind of cool to see. 10th episode, if you're listening to this on the podcast feed. It's the 4th episode, but here or there, it doesn't matter. It's also seminal because this is the first time in a series of videos that I'm going to be talking about Alfred Hitchcock. Because I don't normally talk about the filmmakers behind the scenes on these movies when I do my reviews, but it's Hitchcock. You have to at least talk about him a little bit, and I plan on doing a video on Hitchcock eventually. But to say the least about him, he's a seminal filmmaker. He's one of the most influential creators ever. If you like anything in modern suspense or thriller or horror, chances are its roots are from Hitchcock. He is just one of those guys that knew a genre that was kind of untapped at the time and just turned it into something masterful and brilliant. And he wasn't afraid to do television, which some of these more big creators and directors don't like doing. But the guy just said, it's a creative space. Let's make a creative project on it, and turned out some really great films. Strangers on the Train is a pretty interesting film. Now, is it in my top echelon of Hitchcock? I don't think so, because that list is pretty much untapped of some of the best films ever made. Strangers on a Train is a pretty decent film. I can't wait to talk about it because there's certain moments where I just think it loses momentum, and it's very exciting to get to those points. So if you haven't seen this film, it's from 1951. And basically, it's the story of these two gentlemen. Farley Granger plays a tennis player, and we have Robert Walker come in here as Bruno. They are just two random strangers who meet on a train, and they start talking it up, and they just get into a weird conversation, and Bruno decides, I have this theory in my head. He's got a bunch of these theories he likes to talk about, and this theory is two people who have never met before can plan each other's murders and get away with it with no consequences involved. And he thinks that, Granger's going to get involved in this because it makes sense. He wants his ex-wife gone so he can get the divorce papers and go on to this new person that he's interested in. And Bruno here wants his dad killed so he can finally be free of the burden of his parents. It's a really smart concept. It's one of those concepts that when you put it on paper, you're just this could work in any format. It'd be a good stage play, it'd be a good film, it'd be a good television series, it'd be a good book. And what Hitchcock does is really build up the suspense, because in classic Hitchcock fashion, there is a murder. And when we see the murder of this tennis player's wife, and just the slow reveal of Bruno following her through the carnival, going on the Ferris wheel and all these different rides to follow her to this secluded location, you get that classic Hitchcock tension, and it works really well, builds up its suspense really well. And just the simplicity of the murder, where it's just strangling her, breaking her glasses off, just the easy way, it's just a simple kill, is super Hitchcock. It's just everything this guy does in his films. But then after that moment, I think the momentum kind of slows down. Now, it's not a bad film, because it knows what it's doing, and the suspense is still there, when Bruno is stalking Granger and just following him through all these places. It works really well. You're just seeing this mysterious man in the shadows following this rich, wealthy dude, and it's really cool. But as the story progresses, I think some of the narrative structure falls a little flat on this. It doesn't build up the tension great, I think, in the third act. And when we get to the third act, I'm just really weird choices. But I think when you're looking at Farley Granger's performance, he does a great job of just knowing the situation is not in his favor and slowly losing control of everything happening around him. Because as soon as the world gets bigger and he's kind of the suspect for the murder of his wife, you see the shambles of his life crumble around him, and it looks really cool. It feels really cool. But it just doesn't have some of the emotional impact of other Hitchcock movies. And maybe one of the detriments to this film is comparing it to later Hitchcock, because it's definitely earlier on in Hitchcock's career, so the writing's there, but it's not perfectly executed yet. Maybe that's something I should just step back and let it be, because it's this is earlier on, you're still figuring out the ropes, but still, the tension is really well done. And the quiet moments when Granger and Bruno are meeting, it is really cool to see. You just hey, I killed him. I killed your wife, so why don't you come do the thing for me? No one has to know. It's all going to be hunky-dory. Everything works fine. And when you see Granger's kind of going maybe I should just kill this guy's dad, and he actually goes to the house to potentially kill the dad, and we see that it's Bruno in the bed because we know Granger's not going to actually do it. It's a very striking moment because there's so much cool stuff in there. Again, one of these things that's kind of become a trope is the barking dog. And when we see Granger going into the home to kill the father, there's like the scene of the barking dog. You have to quiet it down, which he does a good job of presenting that. I think it's really cool. That's just become a big trope in everything. You know, if you have like this suspenseful moment, having that animal or that creature. I don't know if it comes from here, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is one of those big influences for that type of thing, because it's really cool to see that. I think that was a really fun area to explore. And, you know, Farley Granger does great. I think he's a tremendous actor who never really broke out some of the bigger stuff as compared to other people who worked with Hitchcock, but Robert Walker, man, like this guy really just killed it. And it's sad that I think he passed away the year that this film was released. He was like 30 something. He's a young guy, but he really just added this creepy nature to the character of Bruno, where it's just like the quietness of everything he does. It just works really well. It's very disturbing. It's all in the eyes. He's got like these really good film eyes, and I know that's weird to say, but like he can just tell an entire story with the way he stares at someone, with the way he smiles, with the way he looks, just like that intense stare and that glare from it. It looks really intense and freaky, and he was just like a perfect foil to our kind of pretty boy Granger here, who's just the tennis player. Now, one of my biggest criticisms of this film is probably the third act. And we kind of see like we got a plan to kind of capture Bruno and frame him for the actual murder of the wife because he did it. So before that, we kind of like got to get Granger out of like this tennis match and get him to like this certain area where he can like leave town and actually not be framed for the murder. But before we get there, and before he can actually like leave town, we have to sit through about 10 minutes of an actual tennis match, which is so boring, and it literally just like slows the story down really fast. And I know it's supposed to be like this really intense moment where it's like, look at everything going on around us, like the intensity of what this guy is feeling, what Granger is going through as he's playing this tennis match. You don't get that feeling. You really don't. You just see like there are two dudes here just hitting the ball around. We're watching the audience look left and right. It is insanely boring. And it kind of just takes you out for a bit. And the tension's still slightly there in that moment, but you're just kind of like bored as it's happening. And you're like, yeah, okay, we're spending a lot of time watching the tennis match. Like, I think later on in Hitchcock's career, we'd maybe have more things going on in the tennis match. And I know we have like Bruno dropping like the match holder into like the sewer, which kind of adds like, is he going to be able to like pin it all on Granger, which he of course doesn't. And again, going back to the carnival at the end of this movie is pretty interesting. I will say like that final fight, like you could call it a fight. It's not really a fight on the carousel. It is shot really good. Like it actually looks very fun. It's like not every filmmaker I think could make that look as good as it did, because you know you're doing like the spinning effects around everything. You have to keep the characters in frame while you are constant motion. You have like all these other side characters who are supposed to be clinging on for their life as this carousel is spinning really fast. But what happens in that scene, which I think is really silly, and I just like, wow, this was dumb. It's just so weird. The only reason the carousel can get shut off is like an 80-year-old man just crawling underneath it while the entirety of the fairgoers and the police force are just watching this old dude crawl underneath this spinning carousel. You're telling me that none of these other people could get under there? Like one of like the younger police officers who wasn't over 70 years old couldn't get under there and do this? It's just like, I'm like, this is so funny for no reason. We're all just like crouching on our knees watching this old dude shut off the carousel, which is just a big lever that you put to stop. It's fun, but it's silly. It's a silly thing to do. And I just think, you know, for an early Hitchcock film, you see all the beats going on there. The tension is well. The characterizations are well. There's some really great characters in here. We see one of Granger's, like his lover, the sister to her, who kind of looks like his dead wife. She is a really fascinating character that I don't think you'd see a lot of in a 50s movie, where she is just so adamant on like the idea of like murder and like that kind of stuff. I guess if you like stated that she read a lot of books and she likes that topic, it's fascinating, but just as like a standalone character, that girl really shined through as somebody unique, because you don't really see it, especially like a leading character in a film like this having glasses. That's not something you particularly see a lot, especially like what really stuck out to me, again, this is really going off topic for a second, but like having Granger's wife like wear glasses throughout the entirety of the film and still be like described and seen as like this beautiful figure is not something you saw a lot of in these older movies. So I think that's kind of cool that she was still this powerful woman while maintaining this thing that Hollywood has pretty much stated isn't this attractive feature back in that day. Like, it's just kind of fascinating. Like, that's what she got to look like and experience. I think that's a pretty cool thing to see. But of course, the standout to me is Robert Walker. He crushed it. He did so much cool stuff in this movie. It's sad he never really got to have a career after it. I wish he could have done more, because there's probably a lot he could have done that would be fascinating to see. Strangers on a Train, it's a nice suspenseful film. It's early Hitchcock, and you're seeing a lot of those early beats hit those notes really well. Sometimes it falls flat. If you like tennis, you'll probably like the tennis stuff in here, but if you don't, it's definitely going to take you out of the film. It's a decent one. It's kind of funny, and it's classically suspenseful. So it's not a bad film by any stretch of the word, but sometimes you just take yourself out of the movie and realize that as good as the actors are, there's only so much you can do with a suspense thing of guys creeping up on each other to plant a murder. I like this film. I recommend checking it out. And that is going to do it for this rendition of Movie Tales. Now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And of course, if you have any recommendations for films you'd like to see me talk about, please leave them in the comments below, because I'm always open to your suggestions. And I will catch you guys in the next one. Have fun, stay safe, good luck.